Joshua, what can hard science, biology, bring to the very sensitive social issues, human issues of sexuality, gender, homosexuality, transgender kinds of issues?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that, like in many cases like this, I think biology can bring us a lot of information that's really germane and relevant to the questions we're having and we're bringing to the table, too. But there's a lot of information that's important, but it doesn't end up being determinative in a lot of the ethical questions that are here. That we still have to negotiate what we think is going to be the good and the right and the kind and the most human or humane way to treat one another.
Sure. I mean, that goes without saying. But what are some of the specific biological pieces of information on issues of sex, gender, trans, sexuality that you can bring to the table?
Well, so let's take the question of like determining what sex an individual is. So both among humans and also other species, I think it's helpful to understand that there's actually multiple definitions of male and female, and that different ones are going to kind of shake out in different ways actually as we kind of apply that to individuals. So for example, one way to think about a male or female is just kind of external genitalia and their physical presentation, right? That's one way. That's actually most people probably understood that over the last several thousand years. But we also now know genetically that the vast majority of men are XY, and the vast majority of women are XX. Mm-hmm. So what do you do, though, with a person who's presenting as a male on their external genitalia, but they're XXY? Or they're presenting as a male, but they're XX. So this is an example now where the genetic definition may not always correspond.
So you can have external male genitalia with XX?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so that's...
I mean, it's rare. We're talking about very rare things, right?
Of course it's rare, yeah.
So there's a couple different ways that can happen. But yeah, it's extremely rare, but it has to do with exposure of testosterone at a particular time. In utero, it will produce that. And that can happen either because of genetic differences that a person has, even though they're XX, or just because of external exposure, too. So it's not even really related to what their genetics are. It actually has to do with exposures they get.
Of the mother during that period.
Yeah, for example. Yeah. For example, from the exposures that the mother had. So how do we think about these? I think the reality is that, while I'd say the majority of people you can pretty much sort out as male and female, it's not always clear what definition's appropriate for that in other contexts. And there is a little bit of a gray area where we might want to have clean definitions and it's not always there. And I think we need to be thinking through carefully in those spaces, which are very real, how to be the most humane and the most human to one another as we possibly can.
Well, I think a good start is to show that there are these differences.
Yeah.
And there may be some cases, we just pick either homosexuality or transsexuality, where you can really show that the genetics are there, and maybe in other cases the genetics are not there. Not that that's determinist in any case, because I think, as you said, the social and the ethical and the humane is by far the most important, but it can certainly skew you because the psychosexual attitudes of people in terms of their sense of their own gender, because they trans people would say, I'm a male trapped in a female body, or the reverse, a female trapped in a man's body, and the terror and the psychological trauma of that, is hard to imagine. So one can sympathize with that. But there will be degrees of that in any psychological analysis. And then if you looked at the genetics and you brought that to the table, not that it's dispositive, but that it is a factor to consider, might influence how you judge the psychosexual by the biological sexual.
Yeah, well, when we think about the differences between humans, it's really common to think that genetics will be determined, but in almost every case we look, there are exceptions, but they're very much the rump exceptions. The vast majority of cases, genetics is very poorly correlated with these sorts of things. Now, there's certainly reasons why we might want to think that they're related to that, because genetics often, I think, in the way it gets deployed in these places, in this discourse, is that it's something that's unchangeable that tells us who we are, but without even really being sure if it's really from DNA per se, if that makes sense. So a person might feel that their gender is a female trapped in a male body, and it might be unchangeable to them, and it really is the truth that they feel that way. I think the chances that that's actually related to genetics, like a DNA change, just given how most things are in medicine, is lower than our intuitions might have. Now, I mean, let the data speak. I mean, maybe there will be some specific genetic markers, but more likely there's going to be a whole bunch of other factors that are contributing into why a person feels even this immutable thing is the way it is.
Yeah, but if there is a genetic determination in that case, that would be a helpful piece of knowledge. Or if there's not, I mean, that's knowledge that should be brought to the table.
Oh yeah, if there is, we want to be the sort of society that is going to be able to kind of look at that question, as important as it is, in a dispassionate way. And whatever the answer is, we're going to treat people who are transgender in the most compassionate and humane way possible, in a way that, science doesn't really give us that, though. It doesn't give us ethics, right? It doesn't tell us how to treat each other well.
Nor should it.
But it can provide information that's helpful for how we think about these things. And we think we just need to be careful about, I'm not sure whether or not we find a mutation for transgender, for example, really should change much about how we treat someone who's transgender.